All right, so we're
So,
here
yeah, go
today
ahead.
to, sorry,
Go
Tao.
ahead, Michael.
We're here today to check out the CI kind of initial experience and setup for a GitLab.com user so that within retention, we can look for potential opportunities for experimentation around that experience so that we can drive higher throughput, more adoption, and therefore better retention renewal rates, 9 months after. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then Tao is going to direct me through getting this set up on my own account.
So instead of starting, we'll start with the simplest use case, which is when a user creates a new project or already has a project and want to start using GitLab CI. And I say by simplest, the more complex one would be if they already, they wanted to use an external repository. Let's say they're wanting to integrate their GitHub repo with GitLab CI. But in the simplest scenario, the user has a project or is creating a project in GitLab and they want to get started. Yes, so you're creating a blank project, they want to get started with CI. There's a couple, so now that they have their project created, what you're displaying there, Michael, they would go to the setup CI. It's in, yes, yeah, right there. You would click on that and for a brand new project. And so there's a couple things they can do here. The simplest thing is the user actually applying a template because there's different personas. A more advanced author may either paste in or start authoring right here, or they can, if you click on the drop down for apply template, they can choose from existing ones that will, depending on what the application is, that'll just insert for them. You can choose either, yeah. So the Ruby one's a little more detailed, but it works. It basically gives them everything they need if their application is using Ruby. And the commit message is already inserted for them. This puts this in their project repository, and all they have to click is commit changes button at the bottom.
So just to pause here for a second. So when I come here, it's it's initially blank.
Mm-hmm.
What if I was someone who's just like interested in getting this up, and I'm not a CI expert, I've never really used it. Mm-hmm. What would I go to, or like what resources do we have that we may want to potentially surface here? Or I'm just trying to figure, like for me, not being super familiar with CI, I come here and I'm kind of like, oh no, I'm now lost. It's just a blank page. It's asking me to type. I see the template drop down, but I may not even know what those templates are. So I'm just wondering if there's even some initial things we could think about on this screen. Like, is there documentation we may want to point to, or anything like that that's like could help me understand what CI can do for me? Like I've shown some interest in it. I clicked the setup button, but is there additional kind of coaching I could get here?
Yeah, so probably the first thing is to send them to the introduction or the getting started. Let me copy it here. I'll drop it into the, so maybe on this page, it would be nice if we link to maybe that documentation page, which is just talking about, after the brief intro about getting started, it talks about creating a GitLab CI YAML file. I guess I was assuming that the user would have already read through this, or they go to create their project and click on create CI/CD file, but you're right, that might not be the case.
Yeah, and I'm probably not the core use case, because someone doing this probably is more familiar with it than I am. It's just one of those things that if I was exploring and maybe not as familiar, it would be nice to have. Do you happen to know, do we have any kind of tracking on like entrances to this page versus the setup success rate of this funnel?
No, but recently last week I was talking to James, the PM for verified testing, and he referred me to a document where the tech writers are tracking all page hits. in the documentation. And so I realized I could start monitoring the page hits to all of the CI relevant documentation page, and then try to figure out some kind of correlation between that and adoption of CI. I haven't gotten that far yet on building out the connections there, because we were talking about how I would go about creating a funnel for, you know, my performance indicator. So
yeah, because that would be really cool to see here as well. It's like if there was let's say 10% of people who get here set it up, or 80%, like that, we would approach those two things very differently.
Yes, the thing that stalled me out was, how do I connect the visits to this page and know that's the same user that belongs to a project that has a GitLab CI YAML file set up, right? Because it's at the closest I can get to identifying the user on those page hits is it uses Google Analytics, and there is source as a field that captures where the user is coming from when they land on that page, and the page view is being tracked. And so you made me think that one thing that we may be able to track is if we link to that documentation page from where you're at when they're creating their YAML file, that would be the source. We could track that. And then we would go, okay, for this page hit, the source was they were on the configure your CI, create your YAML file. And then we could see, was the YAML file from that project, did it trigger a pipeline to know that it was, you know, even if the pipeline was not successful, we could say, oh, okay, that kind of connect them somehow that way. But right now, we aren't linking to that documentation. One thing that I probably should give you a heads up about is, very recently, Jason Yavorska and I were talking about how we want to change, how we want to steer users towards the web ID, for where they want to edit their GitLab CI YAML file. Mm-hmm. And so this editor here will probably slowly play less of a role when the user is starting off and creating their CI/CD pipeline, and they'll get directed to the web ID, because we're going to have more guidance to the user on how to create their file and how to both author the syntax as well as helpful tips and tricks there.
And does the web IDE offer you more flexibility to do that? Is that why?
There's more right now. They've already built out more warnings and helpful tips and tricks when you're authoring incorrectly, for example. Let me find,
So it's already baked in there, and so the idea is just point people there instead of just the regular editor here.
Yeah, this plain editor, which is pretty stripped down, and this plain editor. Oh,
bless you.
Thank you. This plain editor is pretty bare bone, and I think there's a lot of assumption of expertise in using this, and that's why you don't get a lot of guidance on here. Let me find the issue that I'm thinking of, that there's an epic. Let's see. Okay. Oh, that's not it.
While you're looking for that, should I go ahead and commit these changes and see what's next?
Yeah. I'll find that later. Okay. So a couple of things that happened, you'll see at the top under your name, this GitLab CI configuration is valid. And so from that editor, it does get run through our CI linter to check that obviously it's valid also because it's from a template and we know the template has all the correct syntax. But now, now the user has a CI configuration, and if you, oh, did you just open README to the right at a separate tab?
I did, yeah. I'd opened it before.
Or learn more. Sorry.
Yeah. Do you want me to go to that page or?
No, but that was interesting that you did that. I think most users would see that and want to go to this page and see what there is to learn.
Yeah, and my thing was I clicked it and it didn't open a new tab, and so I wanted to. This is one of the things with GitLab that kind of is hit or miss at times. Like I want to be able to have both with.
Yes.
So I could go back and reference.
Yeah. So once they're here, I would guess. I'm just guessing what a new user would do is they would go back to their project and see that they have this in the root, yep, go back to, is it CI experience? Yep. So you'll see it right there in your first and only file. Is that, so that is one route that a user would go through to set up their CI/CD configuration, is to use a template. And then they would choose the template based on the type of application they were creating.
So I see a failure here. So like my again, not familiar user experience here would be, oh no, I did something wrong. Like I applied the template, but something I did was wrong. So what, I guess like as a user, I'd probably click on this and then I see a bunch of X's and I'm wondering.
Okay, so it's looking for, application code files that's not in your project yet. And so it's failing these jobs that are built in. So we chose the Ruby template. So it expects certain files in your repository for a Ruby built application. So that's why.
Got it.
Yeah.
So most users wouldn't have that experience because they probably have some code.
Right.
Theoretically.
Right. They would choose the template that applies to the application files that would use that pipeline. Yep.
Got it. So maybe before we go for like super high level, what are kind of the prerequisites that you need in order to get the value out of CI? So like before I were to go into this experience, you probably want you to have uploaded your repo and got your files all. Like what in your mind are the things like the 3 steps, 5 steps, whatever it is that should be done prior to going into that experience so that you get value out of it?
Right. I'm looking through the documentation because I think we actually call out the specific prereqs that you'd want to have in place to set up CI configurations. We recently updated our documentation. I don't know where I should be grabbing that.
Okay.
Create a file and hold on a second.
While you do that, I'm going to pull up a document that is helping me think through the framework for this, and so I think it will help help you understand why I'm asking the setup things. Because it's a big part of activation. Just kind of stepping back from the aha moment so that you can determine, all right, what are the things we need to have them do before they can experience that aha? Yeah, so here it is. So we're trying to get you to this habit moment. I can try to make this larger so you can see it. Which is using CI, getting value out of it, and kind of more likely now to retain. And in order to do that, you've got to get to the aha moment, which is like that first time they experience the value, the first time the pipeline passes or it fails and catches an error that has saved them time and energy. And before that is the setup moment, which is kind of what we're doing now, but it seems like there's actually a few other prerequisites before the CI setup moment that are also part of that setup moment. And so that's why I'm trying to just understand all of these things so that we can think holistically about that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So even before that's as part of that setup moment, or even before that, the assumption is you have code that you want to build, test, and deploy, or maybe just build and test. So maybe that's the first thing, is they have in their project files for the code that they would want to build and test.
Right.
And then once they have that, because when you create a project, for example, go create a new project, and we'll back up because I think we skipped through something too quickly. Before, okay. Can you click on create from a template to the right? We're not going to do it, but I can't remember. Gotcha. So even before a blank project, if the users want to even take a greater shortcut, they would even choose a project template. But I don't know how basic you want to go. Or, for example, go down to like 10 from the top, pages, get Gatsby. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
If you preview that template, it'll show you, not only will it have the code, like sample code files that you would need for that, it also does it include? It also has an example CI YAML file. Yeah.
Oh,
that's probably the very, very simplest thing that a user would, not simplest, but the quickest way for them to set up a project with all of the necessary code files and a built-in CI CD YAML file or CI file that pertains to that type of code build and testing. Yeah.
So is it fair to say that if you're creating a project from a template, you have CI built in already? So you're part of that kind of retention curve we saw. So that's interesting, because there could be something that's actually related to this more so than actually CI itself, potentially. You know what I mean? It could just be that.
Right.
If we want to make it easier to get started.
Yes, if we want to make it really easy for users, we really invest. And you saw there were a lot of possible project templates if you go back to the drop down for that. And we're just in the preview here. There's 24 built-in templates there. And a lot of these towards the top or the more commonly needed ones. And so it's almost like a turnkey single button. Use this template. It puts everything in there, the code files you need, as well as the GitLab CI YAML file. And then from there, you just modify. The idea is you start from a template, but you modify it to what you need. But at least everything, all the pieces are there, and your pipeline would be green because it has everything it needs.
I wonder why we don't default to template versus
I didn't
blank.
even think of that.
You know, because I wonder how many people actually go to this. Maybe that's something we could look at, Tim, tracking wise.
That's true.
If this is getting you like 60% of the way there versus 0 or 5% of the way, like it seems like a good thing to default people into. So actually, I'm going to take this, if you don't mind, this pages plain HTML one, because that's a language I actually understand, and I could probably get this a little more.
If you go ahead and use template. Yep, it creates the well, you have to name it, and then it creates the project for you, and it has everything you need, and you'll see that the pipeline will not have that failed red X that you saw earlier.
So is this basically doing an import of that preview project? Technically?
Okay. Not the one we previewed, but for this one. I think we previewed the Gatsby one, but
Right.
Yeah, and this is a very basic one. You see there's only very few files there.
Yeah, it's probably just an index, style sheet.
And then if you go into the, if you click to go into the CI YAML file, yep. You'll see it's a very simple YAML file for this pages. It just has the one stage to deploy it, because there's nothing complex that you're building and testing.
Right.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, so maybe the templates might be something to look at, the project creation. Okay.
But yeah, actually, that, come to think of it, when I think about CI alone, I think about the easiest thing for them is to do auto DevOps. But for a user that's just creating everything at the beginning, the project template, which already has the CI YAML file built into it, is probably even simpler to get them started.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably, I mean, this is something we still need to research a lot in terms, like, how much of a use case is that someone like me doing this. It's probably a lot smaller than someone who actually understands it and knows what they're doing. So it might not be the right thing to optimize for, but you can probably also assume that the folks who know what they're doing, they're gonna figure it out and get it done regardless. They'll probably just go to blank and build it all from scratch or import one and have it good to go. Where there's the opportunity is probably the people that are more on the fence, that kind of understand it or are a little intimidated by it, but want to check it out. And if we can optimize for removing the anxiety and friction for those customers or those users, that might be where we actually see the biggest gain.
Yeah. In which case, investing in more and more templates that could account for a greater percentage of all the possible use cases out there would give them, a single button click to get going.
Yeah, especially like more of a long-term play, but like students, people just getting into development. If we make it like, oh, it's super easy to use GitLab versus GitHub, or GitHub and CI or whatever, Circle CI. Then we get them immediately when they're young, when they're just getting started, and then hopefully they stick with GitLab over any competitor, or they prefer GitLab.
Yeah. You made me realize something too. When they're looking at the project templates, maybe we have something if we're going to try to default to that tab, also maybe have something that is a dummy template that really kind of walks through the anatomy of what's in a project template and what's already built in there for you. All these templates here are assuming that you know exactly the type of application you're building, whether it's using Spring or it's an Android app, and you go straight to that template.
Yeah, I mean, even like a blurb here, this prime real estate here around, project templates get you set up with CI and everything you need to get going right away. Click here for more information or learn how to contribute to our built-in template, something like that.
You don't think that's already covered to the left there in the left panel, Neb?
I don't think it says anything about templates. I scanned it. I didn't read every single.
That's true.
But I don't think there's anything mentioned about it. I think that's the same regardless of the tab you're on.
Yeah.
So it's something to think about. Again, this is just me like spitballing without having done enough research, so I could be way wrong on this, but.
No, it's good because you haven't seen this before, and I look at it all the time, and so I think there's a lot of assumption on what the experience is because I forget to look at it with fresh eyes.
Yes, sometimes it's good to get that opinion once in a while, but I'm probably off somewhat here for sure.
When you look at the tabs, the way it goes from blank project to more complex to the right of CI/CD for external repo, it's supposed to be from least complex, like a blank project, to something more complex, but it doesn't necessarily mean blank project is the most user-friendly for setting up. It actually expects more expertise to use than going straight to creating a project from a template that has everything you need.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point. And I think it really does depend on the distribution of our user base. How many are those experts and could just go from scratch. It's also, people making projects that aren't for, well, potentially that aren't so much for actually building and deploying, but they could be like an internal project for issue tracking or something like that. They're not actually shipping.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to dig in to the usage there a little more, I think, to understand what that typical is, the typical setup.
Yeah. Yeah. But even for someone who's really experienced, I just know engineers will tell me it's sometimes faster not to reinvent the wheel and just to go straight to something that has all of the basics files that I need set up, instead of adding them individually on my own to a blank project and then editing all of the ones that are already there based on the template.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
Sometimes it's nice to have that boilerplate.
yeah. And so maybe create from templates should be the, if not the first tab, the tab that you default to when you go to this view.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we keep this order of most blank canvas tab to the far left where there is now, and then more complex, but defaulting to create from template.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'd want to get UX's input on that. So I'm not sure. I don't know what if it's kind of weird to default into the second one versus the first, if we would want to switch them or what. But yeah, that's probably the most MVC way, is just to somehow have that tab selected without any other structural change to the page. All right, so let's say that I've got that set up. Where did that go?
Sorry, Mike, I had one quick question. I didn't know I was muted. Apologies. I was talking away there and wondering, why is everyone ignoring me? On that create project page, I get a different screen to Mike. So I've got 4 boxes. Is there a particular difference between where the entry point for when I create a new project? I'm not sure if I'm wondering if I could just quickly share my screen, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing for sure.
Thank you.
It's interesting. I have GitLab Next enabled, but I doubt that. I bet you do too. So.
I believe I do, although it's not showing up.
No, you don't. Yeah.
But I have this page, and I'm trying to wonder what the difference is between the two. And the reason, I'll show you how I got to here. So,
is that your? No, it's not. I was gonna say that your local.
So I've just got a private group, and I go into new project, and it takes me to this page rather than the tabbed approach. Is this just the starting of the process? So if I clicked on blank, so that I don't have a tab approach at all. Is this a test?
Interesting.
I'm gonna try to add another project. Yeah, I got
it's
the same
interesting.
experience. If you switch GitLab Next on, does it change at all?
I keep on forgetting. How do I get
I can turn it off more easily, actually, because it's already. So
how do I? I've totally forgotten how to turn it on. How do you turn it on?
I forget too. Once it's on, it has the next thing there, and you can just get to the page. So I turned it off now, and I leave the page open so I can turn it back on.
What's the URL? Is it just next.gitlab.com?
Yep, that's exactly it.
Okay, let me switch it back on.
No, I'm still getting the same thing when I'm not on Next. So I don't know. It's weird, Tim. Are you in a private project versus a public project or group?
I went to create a new project as well, and I get the same view that Michael gets. Let me go back. Let me see. So I'm in. Let me compare to what Michael has. I'm in. Oh, that's interesting. Stay there for a moment, Mike. Stay there for a moment, Tim.
No problem.
We're both. So let me go new.
What was your entry for that,
Oh,
Tim?
well.
A private group.
So you went to the group.
Oh, okay. Let me go. Sorry. Let me go to a private group of mine then, just to make sure that I'm doing the same thing.
I think mine were also private.
Okay, so make it.
Yeah, I thought that's why I asked, because I thought your group was also private, Mike.
Yeah, no, I get the same experience that Michael got. So and the
Interesting.
URL, but you know what? Here's the difference. When I go to create a new project, in your URL, it has new question mark, but then it has the namespace ID. Mine, go to the top of your URL and remove everything from the question mark to the right.
Okay.
Yeah,
maybe.
Including, oh no, no.
It looks like this must be a test.
But
I've got a feeling.
Interesting that it randomly takes you. But
I wonder who's running it too.
Yeah, someone's running a test.
Project in the command line. Interesting. I haven't seen that. What you're experiencing.
Or it's something that's been released on a feature flag, with maybe percentage-wise of traffic.
Can you take a screenshot of what you
sure.
have there and just go to the questions Slack channel and ask, is this the result of a testing that's done? And then I'll ping me on it as well, so that I can add my screenshot of what I see, what I get when I go to create a project. Interesting.
Cool. I'll stop sharing in it, Mike. You can take over. Sorry for that diversion.
No worries.
Okay. So sorry, I was just kind of bouncing around. If I go back to that project, the recent projects never works now. Sorry. How do I get to the projects within the group view? Oh, they're just listed right here. Some of our nav trips me up, Ken. the many layers. All right, so if I did that, so I'm set up, it's my HTML project, I've got the YAML. So from now on, it would just be like whenever I commit any code, it just automatically runs through those pipelines, and that's it.
Yeah.
I'm good to go, right?
Yeah. Yes. You can, in the left nav, go to CI/CD and go to the pipelines page, and just click Run Pipeline. Go ahead and run pipeline. Okay, sorry, you don't.
I could try one of the the Ruby project too.
Oh, it's running now, Mike.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, so this is because the user is using a template that has all of the required just bare bone code for an HTML project.
And if I was coming from GitHub and Circle CI or something like that, what would that typical process be? Is it like copy and paste? Or?
Actually, go back to click on new project. Yeah, you'll see that in the information to the left, it'll say to use third paragraph, to use only CI/CD features for an external repository like GitHub. Choose CI/CD for external repo. So it's the far right tab in the main window, CI/CD for external repo. And then the user would be guided through, right now we support GitHub, and then a specific URL to the repo. And so they would click on one of those buttons and either, let's say it's GitHub, there's instructions on how to put in the details of that repository to connect it to their CI/CD pipeline in GitLab.
Interesting. Do we know if people are using that? Have we ever tried to like get them to use GitLab for everything else as well?
So for those folks that is heavily invested in GitHub, this is the way that they can start using GitLab. Is just connected to use GitLab for CI. In fact, there was, and there is a good number of users that are set up that way. There was actually a community contribution in 13.3. I was looking at it in the release post that their changes were merged in, but we don't write up every community contribution. But the relevance of that is they wrote a addition to when you're using external repository, being able to call out the name of that repository in addition to all the other attributes that we specify. So I know it is important to those users to have that integration working between GitHub and GitLab. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, let's say I was doing a full migration, or let's say that I was using like Circle CI or just a different CI tool outside of GitLab, and now like I'm gonna combine all this into GitLab. I like GitLab for the repo and everything, but I want to condense all the tools I'm using and reduce the complexity in my tool chain. What they would then, that is that the previous? Would they do an import? Well, no, that would be the entire project. So would they set the project up first and then go into the CI setup like you showed me before, and then like paste in their code kind of thing?
Not everything from Circle CI is going to translate to the syntax that we support for GitLab CI YAML file. I just put in the Zoom chat there, the documentation that we have to guide users migrating from Circle CI, because we call out, first of all, what the differences are. So if you scroll down to Circle CI example with workflows, it shows that in CI, Circle CI, and how that same thing would be authored in GitLab CI/CD, so that they can see the difference. I don't think it's a clear copy paste for them. They would kind of have to rework. When I say syntax, we use different keywords than they do. And so it's just guiding them on what they would have to change and basically re-author.
Where is that section? I'm jumping out of it.
Let me share my screen. Wait. So the link I gave you should land you here, and then it's showing right here. This is the Circle CI example. And then how that same thing would look with stages in GitLab CI/CD. So like our syntax, just the convention of how we set things up in GitLab CI, we call out the stages at the top, and you'll notice that you don't need to do that in Circle CI. And then we, within each job, we reiterate which stage this job belongs to. The first two jobs belong to stage build, and then the third job is for the stage test. They don't necessarily do that in there. So it's you see how copying and pasting this in to the GitLab CI YAML file is not going to work correctly.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
This is super helpful. Yeah, the GitLab one looks a little more condensed or efficient, if you will. Doesn't seem as verbose. Got it. Do you know, is there any discussion like industry wide about trying to standardize on that? Like any other kind of language or?
I mean, for the end user, that would probably be just something they would be happy for. But it comes down to, we think ours is more logical, and obviously our competitors thinks their way of creating a pipeline is more logical. So I don't know.
Yeah, it would be a tricky thing to do.
Yes, it's the same thing of, we would like all phone chargers to have the same adaptation point, right? I mean, and not to have to use adapters. but getting there is another, is is who's going to win out, whoever.
Right. Well, and it's a kind of competitive moat. You know, you don't want to make it too easy to just pick up and leave if you're a circle or anyone else. So
yeah,
especially if you're only CI.
Yeah.
So I can understand that as well.
But that example there, it clearly shows that even Circle CI, even though the way they set up configure their jobs in their pipeline is pretty close, a lot similar than what you would see in a Jenkins job compared to GitLab. But even so, you see there's differences that they just don't, we couldn't build a translator that automatically shifts it all into the way we would write a pipeline.
Got it. Cool.
We're almost at time, but did I answer the questions that you had for this session? Should we have ongoing? I don't know what is helpful to you.
Yeah, no, this has been super helpful for me. Thank you so much. I don't know if we need another session just yet. I think what will end up happening is Tim and I will dig in more and more, and then we'll probably get a list of additional questions, and maybe then we'll reach back out and regroup. We're also going to try to keep an eye on and monitor all the research that's picking up with Lori and others around this. Mm-hmm. So it's good timing for us if these larger projects are kicking off, so we can kind of piggyback on them. But no, my goal for today was really just try to understand it from a customer and new user perspective, and you definitely got me all the way there on that, so I really appreciate it. And no, I think for now we've got some homework to do, and we'll definitely circle back with questions when we come across them. But this has got me everything I needed to start that process. I don't know, Tim, if there's anything that you are curious about learning more, or you have questions while we have Thao on the line for a few more minutes.
No, that was the only question I had was just in regards to that create new project page, and I'm sure we will get to the bottom of it soon. So from me, no questions. Thank you so much, Thao.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention, I just put in the Zoom chat a link to the Epic. I mentioned that we're trying to move away from that very simple YAML file editor that you first get when you create a project, to steering them towards using the Web IDE, because there's already things that the Create team is building into the Web IDE that guides the user in authoring. So it's a heads up.
So if I pull up a YAML file, like a GitLab CI YAML file, and I go to the Web IDE, I should see some additional functionality in there.
Well, if you pull up the YAML file and you click edit, it will, instead of taking you to the editor that we were just looking at when you create a project, it'll take you to the Web IDE editor. Since that's going to be the future of where we're going to steer all of the editing of the CI YAML file.
Right, but if I go to the Web IDE with one today, now, I can see what those changes are.
Not yet. The issues that are in this Epic is to start introducing that, making that possible in the Web IDE.
Cool.
And then the very last issue in that list, for example, of that Epic, make Web IDE the preferred experience for editing. That's the one that's going to achieve it. It's in our current milestone.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool. I will definitely keep an eye on this. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Thao. This has been a huge help. Really appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.
Okay. Take care.
Right. Thanks. Bye.